Hello, and welcome to the Scaling Therapy Practice. This is the show where we help you make small steps towards big growth. And some of you, that growth is going to be hiring more people or hiring virtual assistants. For some of you, it's going to be uh, going to another building or expanding your office locations or offering different hours. And for some of you, you want to do more with your education and maybe make some passive income and create courses and content from your education. Well, I have a resource for you if you're wondering if your topic is a great idea to teach on. I have a resource of validating your topic in 4 steps where I take you through the some free resources online that you can just use to your advantage and discover if people are talking about your topic, if books have been written about your topic, searching for popular YouTube videos on the topic, and then mining that information for gold. And it's going to give you a good idea on if your topic is something that is already out there. And here's the secret: if people are writing about your topic, if books are being written about your topic, if there's a YouTube following for your topic, then that means your topic is valid. That means somebody's spending money on it. Somebody is creating books and having publishers write things about it. And it's good to go through this process and find, yes, there are resources out about it. And then I show you how to mine that resource for either course content for yourself or finding the gaps that you can fit in. It's just a valuable free resource before you start investing in production of your course. Just doing a little bit of research, 30 minutes to an hour of looking and making sure it's a valid topic. So you can find that resource on my homepage, coursecreationstudio.com, and then just go to the free resources. It is called um, Course Creation Tools and Templates, and then scroll to the bottom, and it is Validate Your Profitable Course in 4 steps. There's also 2 other free tools there that you can use. But yeah, check it out and then email me your questions. I'd love to talk to you about your topic and your research and, things you're finding, because I want to help therapists spread their education and knowledge into the world and help more people. That's how I help people. I help the helpers get their stuff out there. So email me, james@coursecreationstudio.com. And now on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Scaling Therapy Practice. This is James Marland, and I have your co-host, Dr. David Hall. Hello, David.
Hi, James.
This week, we're going to talk about 3 policies that make running your practice easier. But before we do that, we're going to get into our tool, tech, or tip of the week. I'll go first this week. And I've been listening to The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz on Audible. I really like Audible. It's just easy to get a lot of books in. And the Pumpkin Plan is Pumpkin Plan Your Biz, like how to, I'm sure there's a subtitle there, but how to grow your business like you would grow a giant pumpkin. And the one tip that is impressed upon me right now is to grow a giant pumpkin, you have to remove the weaker, smaller pumpkins from the vine and just nurture the big pumpkin that's going to grow into the giant fair winning pumpkin. So the tip there is to kill unpromising ideas and feed the idea that is growing and will produce the most the biggest business. It's about niching and that type
That's
of
interesting. I'd heard the title of the book before, and honestly, it's a generational thing, I think. But like, I think of the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown thing, and we talk about the Pumpkin Plan. I think about, like, is it convincing your friends about a holiday
No.
creature that it's the but but that's hard what you're describing. James and I are doing some course planning, and that was what we were doing before we hit record. And it's really hard to kill off ideas because they're new and they're shiny. And what if that's a better idea? 'Cause the other thing too is like, well, what if this other pumpkin is the real pumpkin that's going to win me the ribbon at the fair?
Right. Yeah.
And
Well, and when you have clients, it's like, "Oh, I can't get rid of that client. I need all the clients I can." That's one of the big fears in the
mm,
book as managers have. Like, "I can't get rid of this section of clients because I need everybody."
which is sometimes true, I guess, but it becomes related to that. One of the things, and I was on a coaching call with somebody yesterday, and one of the things I was discussing with them is a lot of people I do consulting coaching with. They're people that have a lot of ideas, and here are all these different ideas, and a lot of them are good ideas. It's not sometimes there's some stinkers, and I try as gently as I can to say, like, yeah, I don't think that idea has wings. I think it's either it's too obscure or it's too complicated to execute or kind of whatever. But let's say I'm talking with somebody and they have 5 decent ideas. Oftentimes their goal is they may recognize what you're describing, James, but their goal is, how do I pick the best? And I really don't like spending energy with that question. I think and this was the thing in my coaching call yesterday or meeting was, I go, I wouldn't try to pick the best. I would just try to pick one. Well, what if it's not the best is the question returned. I'm like, I don't think it matters. Like it may matter in ways that you won't be able to go back and know. My big thing is consistency. Is pick something. In some ways, anything, not really anything, but nearly anything, and do it consistently,
Mm,
because it's amazing what you can grow, pumpkin or otherwise, if you're just willing to be consistent with it. And that's kind of the impulse that is the countervailing force to the desire for novelty. When we seek novelty, it's really hard to be consistent. Because what if this is better? What if this will catch, quicker? What if this will grow quicker? What if I think when we grow our pumpkins, we think about, well, if I had gamma radiation to this, might it give me a bigger pumpkin? But how do I speed up this process? It's like, well,
well, I think the novelty is a trap, though, because then you become a generalist. You're a generalist in all these things, and you command generalist attention and generalist price. And when you're specialist, you get a larger share of smaller amount of people, but you get the people who want your exact skill, your exact
mhm,
process to get them where they want to go. And they'll pay more for it because that's have exactly what they want. So
mhm,
that's kind of, I think that's the one of the big um emphases of the book is you want those people who want exactly what you can provide.
mhm. Yeah, no, that's good.
What's your tool tip or tech of the week?
Mine, and before I realize that for people that are listening to this, whatever. But if you're watching this, you're on YouTube. I want to apologize for the mess kind of behind me. I am James. We started recording today. James like, oh, you're in a new office, and I am. I'm in my home office. I usually record from my clinic office where my practice is, and my home office. I haven't done any work out of my home office in a little bit, and the problem is my home office is in a basement corner of my house. It's a great place in the sense of it's kind of sequestered in the corner, and it doesn't a lot of the noise from the rest of the house doesn't carry over. It's easy for me to kind of hole myself up in here when I'm trying to do work. The problem with that is it's also an easy place for me to just put junk. And when I like get home from a camping trip or something, and there are things I really need to put away, oh man, it's easy to go in the office and just because my office is either an office or a giant closet. And so I've got crap in the background.
It happens.
It happens. Anyway, but I want to start that. That's not my tip. Well, yeah, I guess that could be a tip. Is like keep your office clean.
You never
Like,
know when you're going to record.
you never know when you're going to record. But here is my Loom. For those
Oh,
who know, so
yeah.
Loom is a video recording extension. You put it in your browser. You can do it on your. It's an app you do on your phone. I've used it. People will use it for a lot of things. People will use it for even like course recording to do screen grabs. Like it's helpful for a lot of stuff. I've had friends that have used it for a long time. I've used other video recording software. I use something called Bonjoro, which is a thank you system for when people buy certain of my courses, and that just kind of works in a slightly different way. And I've been thinking about using Loom. For me, the big helpful thing is I'll record Loom videos for emails because I can get on my phone or get on my computer and record a screen grab video much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And it just helps me my communication flow. And I also come across a lot more personable speaking than I do in writing. I struggle in to think about particularly I've had a few communications this week that needed to have some nuance to it. And if you're just sending an email, there's the question of what are they going to infer about my tone? What are they going to? And it's much easier to manage those nonverbal communication things in video. So I like it. I like it for the ease. I like it. So if you're looking to add a little personal touch to your communication and a great tool for your workflow, use Loom. Loom.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
great.
there's a free version, and so yeah, that's my tip.
Yeah, we used it. We used it in the virtual assistant company to record processes and then just save the link to the process. And if the process had to change, you just re-recorded a video on how it went. It was much easier to follow and took much less time than typing everything out and like all these training things like the Loom. Loom is great for when you have work on the computer to screen capture.
Yeah.
It's a really nice, simple, intuitive system. I really like Loom.
Yep.
I do have a small segue. The policy I had for email is if I couldn't communicate my message in two emails, it needed a phone call or a face to face. Because I don't know about you, but if you ever get into a misunderstanding email chain, they it is the worst because you're like, no, that's not what I meant. Why are you replying like that? I will just explain it again, and then it gets worse, and then worse and worse. And so I developed the two email policy. If I can't get it done in two emails, it's a phone call.
Well, I agree. And for people that work with me more directly, phone calls is kind of, and I've had to, and we're talking about policies today. That is a more informal policy I have with my staff. I go, do not send me these emails like this. Like I need, like this is a phone conversation,
Yeah.
and this is how you need to send it to me, and et cetera, et cetera. So, but no, for my instances, these are people I don't. I the emails came out of a desire to move a conversation with people that I more tentatively know off of social media. They're like, hey, let's
Yeah.
like, but I have email contact, but not a phone number. So, but you're right, James. I would have preferred to do a phone call if I had that relationship with people. But this is, and so it's like introductory things. Like I'm introducing myself to some people.
No, it's great though. Like when I joined a conference or I took a class and they sent me a video and said my name and it was only like 60 seconds long. It was like, oh, they
Yeah,
care about me. So
it's very
Loom's
personable.
great for those things. So we're going to talk about policies today, specifically 3 policies that can help you run your practice easier, better, quicker. Um, uh, so David, we're going to talk about that. I think one of the policies that I hear a lot is a no-show policy.
Yep.
Can we talk about your no-show policy and how how it fits with your practice?
Sure, and it's an evolving thing. So I worked for a group practice for a number of years, and their no-show policy was 24-hour cancellation, with the exception of illness and kind of, we allowed, the practice allowed individual therapists or reception staff to make decisions on should this be a waived fee because someone's sick last minute or there's inclement weather or things like that. But generally, it was the full cost of the session for that. Now, this context works in this was a cash-based practice. If you're doing insurance, there are different rules of what you can and can't do, and what's even if you're doing Medicaid or Medicare work, you can't do anything.
I was going to ask about that. Like how, maybe we'll get into that, but how do you deal with that when you can't
How a
charge?
lot of practices I know that work very heavily with that is overbooking. They'll book
Oh,
they'll plan a certain number of people just won't show up, and so they double, sometimes triple book. Because if you only book, I think of a few practices I know of, medical and mental health as well, and slash counseling, but that they did a lot of Medicaid-based work. And what that is that it's a set fee, but there's no copay. The client doesn't necessarily owe anything in it, and you can't charge them anything for it. It just it's part of your contract, your agreement with the state or the HMO who's managing the Medicaid payments or whatever it is. And so it becomes, well, if the patient comes, we have an encounter, then this is the billing unit. But if they don't show up, then it's nothing. And so the way if they had 8 sessions and they knew that if they booked 8 people in 8 sessions, that, anywhere between 6 to 3 of them wouldn't show up.
yeah.
And so how do you manage that? Well, you just kind of, it becomes an actuarial decision. And you're like, well, we typically have a no-show rate of this amount, so we're going to book over. The problem is every once in a while you have days where more people show up, and then it's people wait, and there are difficulties with that. I'm very sympathetic because you have to have that balance between serving the clientele within the financial capacity that is allowed and running a business. But
Yeah, I remember when I worked at the hospital, the outpatient clinic, that we had a good majority, I think, of our clients were the Medicaid,
Mhm.
and so the no-show rate, uh, I mean, does 30%, like 30% or something, like 3 out of every 10 wouldn't show?
I've
It
not
was
worked in that setting. That feels perfectly believable in some ways,
Yeah,
maybe
it was a
reasonable.
lot, and so that really led to some other business decisions. How many how many clients can you see in a day? We were talking about this in the pre-show where, the people want that full hour, so they'll, like, put pack them in back to back to back, do the notes in the session, like the treadmill type of thing,
Yeah.
just to make it worth the while because of all the cancellations, and they couldn't recoup any of the costs. And as you talk about your overbooking system, which makes sense to me, our software didn't do it very well. Our software didn't allow
I want to
book
be clear. I have not worked in this setting. This is just what I've seen.
well, okay, it's something in my past that it was always a problem, like
Mhm.
the no-show. Like, I had a friend who they were cash pay, and they had very few no-shows just because of what you said. They would charge the rate. Like, you miss this thing, you have a late cancellation, you're gonna get charged, and that solved the no-show problem, uh, to 2% or something.
It does reduce it quite a bit. So when I went to start my own practice and looking at policies for this, so similar payer model where we're a cash-based practice, but we made the decision to do 50% of the
Okay?
client fee. And there are a few reasons for that. One, the full fee felt kind of punitive,
Mhm.
and often I felt was more likely to lead to a rupture in the therapeutic relationship because it was so high. Where this felt more understandable to a lot of people. That's one factor. It is you're paying for the time, and the time is, if you no show and then I've got this time that I blocked out for you, and yeah, it makes sense that I should be paid for that. But it's still not the same amount of work as it would be to actually do a session. Because I have a last minute no show. I may not know they're not showing until 15 minutes, 20 minutes into it, let's say.
Yes.
That still gives me like a 30-minute bit where I can get a bite to eat, I can go for a walk, I can catch up on some notes,
Catch up on your notes.
I can make some phone calls. It I get some bonus in that too, and so that kind of represents it. But here's the third thing. I my practice is in a college town. We have a lot of college students. Probably I would say a third to of our clients are college students, and they're not personally responsible for their sessions almost to the person. They
Mm-hmm.
have parents who are paying the credit card in that,
Mm-hmm.
but they're typically legal adults, and we're not always communicating or even have permission to communicate with the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And parents will come in and be like, "Well, has Johnny been showing up to his appointments?" or things like that. Well, here's the we couldn't say, but the parents can see the credit card bills. And if there's a different unit being charged, if your session's usually $27, but there's been these several charges that have come through of 66.50,
Mm-hmm.
then mom and dad may have a conversation with Johnny because
Mm-hmm.
that's Johnny no showing his appointments. And that was a way for us to loop in a certain level of accountability. That wasn't the initial plan. That was just something we realized after the fact. We're like, oh, this is handy. But even in that, we do extend a lot of grace. One of the things I say, it's not an official policy because that's the official policy is it's 50% of the session fee. But we have amongst the staff a bit more unofficial. And part of how
How do
they
you manage that? Like, how do you manage the flexibility?
ultimately, since our clinicians are paid based on disbursement percentages of client fees, there's money that would go to the clinic and there's money that goes to the clinician. If the clinician's willing to forego it, then,
Mm-hmm.
and we also have a small enough of a group that we troubleshoot it. I have a lot of my staff that will come in, ask me or ask my wife, who's co-owner and practice manager, about a certain situation. But it is generally the general rule is, and they're few. This is I guess more official policy, but it's not written down. It's something that the staff knows that if it's an intake, if we've never seen the person and they no show, you just got to eat that because
Yeah.
if we have not even established an initial therapeutic relationship with somebody, we're not going to charge for that. That's an ethical decision that we've made, and it also is this idea that if they do come back, if their only experience with us was a a fee for a session they didn't use, the likelihood
Not a
of them
good start
it's not a
for
good
the
start.
therapeutic alliance. Yeah.
If it is an unexpected illness, someone called. This happened to me this week. Someone called in and be like, "Hey, I'm not feeling great and I'm running a bit of a temperature. I don't want you to come into the office."
Mm-hmm.
And so even though that was only a few hours before the appointment or life happens, where we hold a harder boundary with people is if the same things in life happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically everyone's allowed a pass, at least one. But if it's chronic, then it becomes, that's the issue. Uh, and that's something we deal a lot with that for our pre-licensed people we deal with in supervision. We want to give our therapists discretion on what feels like a good boundary to keep versus what would be rupturing to the therapeutic relationship. And that's a
Yeah.
hard thing to know perfectly in every moment, but it's a good question to ask. So that's one policy. So our policy is 50%, um, forgiveness for illness, for things like that. But it's funny, like snow or the inclement weather. And so I'm in this interesting place in the country. I'm in East Tennessee, the Mid South. So we get snow. We're not like South Texas or Florida or like snow's not uncommon in the winter. But we get it infrequently enough that no one knows how to do anything with it. Like people don't know how to drive in snow. We get it enough where we get it, but not enough where that we can handle it. So if there's a threat of snow, people will cancel a whole bunch of stuff. It's not even snowing yet, but it might snow and like, oh, my driveway is pretty steep. We might, and that used to be an issue, but since telehealth has become a norm, we just okay, we'll just do a video session.
Mm, that's
So
great.
that is great. So that's the first policy.
So that's the first policy. The second one we talked about is same day appointment. So tell me what that is and how it benefits your
Don't
practice.
allow it. So we have
Don't
a rule.
allow it. What
Don't
does that
allow.
mean? What is it?
If you call and be like, "Can I get an appointment today?" We don't do same. It's similar to walk-ins. We don't do walk-ins,
Okay.
but we don't do same day appointments. And here's why that's a policy. If someone has that level of urgency, is our setting appropriate for them?
Mm,
If it now, this is another one of those things. This isn't a hard rule where let's say someone calls for an intake and a therapist is handling it for their own schedule. And this therapist doesn't have another opening in the week, but they have something later this afternoon, and they offer it to be like, hey, I've got later this afternoon. But it's the client that's insisting, like, I need to get in today, and it's a new client sort of thing. And I want to clarify too, like, this isn't existing clients. This is someone new. If you're in that bad of a situation, outpatient counseling center probably isn't what you need. And so we do that as a filter in that, like, if you really feel that in crisis, we probably are the place that can help you stabilize the most. Because, okay, you come in, you do an assessment session. Are we going to be able to help you get regulated or in a safe enough place within that? And if it's that much urgency, then it's better to direct you to a higher level of care.
And I think, if I remember correctly, if they're referred to a higher level of care, insurance is only going to pay for the higher level of care that day.
Sure, yeah. There are a few different things in that as well. But it just becomes a way that we've learned. The other bit is, are they going to be a good long-term fit appointment-wise? For example,
Right.
if somebody needs, let's say it's not in the sense of that it's a safety issue or they're that low prices, but it's just their own sense of immediacy. Can I get in today? I need to get in today. I have to get in today. How likely are they going to continue? Because I find that for a lot of individuals like this, they run very hot and very cold. And so you catch them in a hot moment, and then later it's like, oh, I'm fine. And they'll no-show the appointment next week, or they like. And so I just find that our level of care that we have to offer, you need to be able to, like, wait a day or two. I'm not saying we put people off, because we have this thing where we don't. Some practices will book people out for a first-time appointment over a month. We don't do that. The latest we'll do is like 2-3 weeks, and that's only, we'll do 3 weeks if a therapist has a vacation week in there, and that's just the accommodation of that. But for a first-time appointment, we can't get you in under a month. For a provider, that provider's not available, is the way I
Right.
treat it. Now, some people may strongly disagree with that, but I was fielding an intake this week where that was the situation that came up, that somebody had booked with another therapist, had waited a month for the appointment, got in, had the first appointment, but that therapist didn't have another appointment for another month. And I see there are issues with that. I think there are professional standards and ethics that come into that. Like, are you really available to serve this person in this way?
Right.
And if not, now, where I think it's good to have some flexibility in this, depending on what other resources are in your community, if you're kind of it, or you're kind of it for the payer platform, I want to encourage people to be contextual as you're thinking about what you can and cannot offer. For myself, in my setting and context, as a fee-for-service practice where there are other fee-for-service options in town, I don't think it's right to keep people on a wait list when I could direct them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because don't want to make them wait that long. But anyway, same day appointments usually represent too much urgency to be our setting to be the correct fit. And I will say, if you're running like a more intensive, if your context and practice, if you're running a day treatment program or intensive outpatient program, then same day appointments may work great. But the level of care we offer does not manage well with people in that level of crisis.
And having that policy in place filters the crisis clients to the right level of
Yes.
care. Yeah.
And we have it on our website where we say no same day appointments.
No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. All right, great. And so the third policy that makes your life easier for running your practice is a policy on notes. So tell me why. I mean,
I am not.
tell me why this makes your life easier as the manager when you have or owner as when you have a policy on notes.
Either sort of thing. So, I've had several friends that have given me examples of this. I have one in particular. I'm not going to call them out on the podcast, but if they're listening, they'll know who they are. Who was notorious. It was a coworker of ours at a previous group. Notorious of getting very behind in notes. And there are issues with that. There are issues if you're billing insurance in any form. Definitely if in network, but even out of network super billing sorts of things. You cannot bill for sessions that are not documented, because you get a lot like that. That is insurance fraud, which is a big deal. but for us, even in cafe practice, there's and here's what it is for a lot of our providers. There's their handwritten notes, which is like a legal pad sort of thing, which they then go into to create a digital chart, charting a digital progress note in our EHR. And that's where the gap can sometimes be. So our policy is that in our employment agreements, notes are supposed to be caught up by the end of every week. They absolutely have to be completely up to date by the end of the month. And if it's not up to date, your pay is withheld until it is up to date. So no one gets that far in the rears. And partly because there are legal issues with that. And it's also, our goal is not to be harsh. Our goal is to be accountable and to our therapists as well, because it can, I mean, I've heard stories of months and months and months, and then it just becomes our friend Gordon Brewer had somebody that worked for him a number of years ago that this was just nothing. I mean, it was, I'm getting agitated just thinking about that because that was such a bad deal for Gordon. And if he's listening to this, he's like, "Oh my God, yeah, I'm sure he'll be coming to my friend," but it was such a bad deal. And there are legal issues, there are ethical issues, quality of care, there's just practical issues. And so for us, our desire wasn't to be overly punitive, just becomes a matter of fact, like you just don't get paid. So
That kind of that solves that problem.
well, and we're even thinking about adding, like, it becomes to where everyone gets it done, but sometimes it creates more work in the payroll process. And so we're actually about to implement a fine that if it's not done on the time, that automatically there's a fine, regardless of whether you get it done in the next day or so, because it creates more work on the payroll side.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and if, but they don't get paid if they, or are they getting paid if they
they
don't?
are eventually, but it becomes like, because it's a big thing to withhold somebody's entire paycheck
Yeah.
for the month. And so we're even now toying with this idea of some intermittent sorts of things.
Yeah.
Not that we're not going to pay them, but it becomes like they're a day late in getting their notes done. But it makes the payroll process, running payroll, more difficult. And there's a sense of just accountability with who's running payroll, because they have to go back and check.
Yeah, it's more work. I have two horror stories. One was I worked with a psychiatrist who didn't do their notes for a while, and they had to like cancel their sessions for a week or something because we were coming up on audit season and they had to get their notes done. And so that's one horror story where you could lose,
Yeah.
multiple days of work on one of your most expensive staff because they don't get their notes done. The second horror story was there was a one department got lax in their notes and they got audited, and the how it works was they would review like 10 charts or whatever and then take the percentage of notes that weren't done and take back that much money. So it ended up being like 30 or 40%, not just of those charts, but of everything that was paid. And it was a big deal. Like people lost their jobs over that or were demoted or something. Like if you don't stay on top of your notes, it's I love how you brought in the legal and ethical
Mhm.
side of it, but it's also a financial risk too. So having
Absolutely.
that policy in place, and you're not the bad guy when you enforce it because you're actually protecting everybody. You're protecting the patients, you're protecting the business, and you're protecting the clinicians for all those consequences of not getting those notes done. It's not like, oh, uh, you're the bad guy. You're the good guy doing this with that policy
Mhm. Mhm.
because of the consequences. Anything else you want to say on notes?
Get them done.
Get them
It's not
done.
fun. No one enjoys doing notes, I find, but
Yeah.
it is, you know, they don't get any easier. You let them, they don't age well.
Yeah.
It's not like wine. You don't need to leave it in to get it to a certain place. So,
Yeah, when I did
uh,
notes, I had to do them at the end of I did intake sessions, so I had to do my notes at the end of the intake session because I couldn't do 3 or 4 intakes and remember everything. Like, I just had to build my time in. Like, I had to build time in at the end to get it done, so that I could effectively manage the next one. And that's just one way to manage it.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So 3 policies that can help you run your practice more efficiently: the no-show policy, same-day appointment policy, and of course, the infamous no policy. David, what's one thing you want people to remember if to take away from the episode today?
Get your notes done.
Yeah,
That's it. Get your notes done.
it's simple. And my one thing is I loved how you use the power of the policy to filter your preferred client. I thought that was simple and effective and kind. Like, it's clear and that's kind to people. Like, you don't want to give them a service. My heart broke when people would come in for a service and we were the wrong, they waited so long for it and we were the wrong service for them. That was terrible. So I loved how you that policy, the same day policy, filters people to the right program. It's really good.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening. Thanks, David, for being a great co-host.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
This is James Marland with Dr. David Hall for the Scaling Therapy Practice, where we encourage you to take small steps towards big growth. We'll see you next time.
Psych Maven is proud to support the Scaling Therapy Practice podcast. And if you are someone looking for ideas that are tailored to your own personal style on how to scale and grow your own impact and income as a mental health provider, we hope you might check out our free online assessment. If you go to stp.psychmaven.com, you can take our free personal inventory and find out what your builder type is as a helping professional. This assessment is quick and fun, and it comes with tons of customized resources with your results, so you can discover the best ways to scale that match your own personality. Find the assessment at stp.psychmaven.com. That is stp.psychmaven.com. Have fun with it.
Thank you for listening to the Scaling Therapy Practice. I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to remind you that the content shared today is for general information and entertainment purposes only. It shouldn't be considered as legal or tax advice. If you need a professional advice in those areas, please consult with a licensed attorney or accountant. But thank you so much for listening. The Scaling Therapy Practice is part of the SciCraft Network.